gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Education Matters with Jim O'Connell. Very pleased that you could join us. If you're watching live, you're watching on Tuesday, December 4th at 6 p.m. when we're live from 6 to 7 p.m. and then this show is carried at other times during the week. If you're watching live, we'd love to hear from you. The phone number here is 640-3091. It's probably on the screen as well during the live. One of the ways, by the way, you can tell when watching Manchester Community television programs is usually when it is live, the telephone calling number is on the screen, and it's removed when the programs are repeated at other times during the week. So anyway, calling number 640-3091. I'd be very happy and pleased to hear from you and any thoughts you might have. It's amazing how fast time goes by, and Thanksgiving seems like it was yesterday as opposed to a week or so ago, a week or more ago. And we're already in the Christmas season. And so for students, this is a time for often there's hard work to be done at this time of the year, and it's an old repeated mantra of mine that not every day is created the same in school, and not every week is the same, that there are periods of more intense learning than others. And while teachers may be attempting to make every day an equal level of learning attainment or knowledge attainment, etc., I think the reality is that these things, classes build up to a time where papers are due, or coming to the end of chapters in books or subjects within a certain subject. And for those who are on a semester calendar, then some classes are coming to an end. And so these are the weeks when a lot of work gets done, and I know that once you get to high school and then to college level, that people are sort of cramming it in at this time of the year. So I wish all of them, everybody who's doing that, very well, and I encourage people to, if it's a little tough right now and there's a lot of work and a lot of assignments due and stuff, 2 or 3 weeks from now it'll all have come to an end. And actually, if we just look at the dates for the district, so school finishes on the 23rd. And school will be closed from December 24th through January 1st, with school reopening on January 2nd. So that's not so far away, right? 20 days from today. So, just since I'm on that topic of things that I refer to regularly, I haven't talked about Aspen on this program for a while, and I'm not going to spend much time on it here, other than to say that Aspen is the portal through which parents can access the reports from their children and academics and homework and other things. So if you go to, you can access it through mansd.org. You have to have signed up, of course, and that's still quite convoluted and something the district needs to look at. But in any case, if you go to your school, they'll be able to help you with, or call your school, they'll be able to help you with registering for Aspen. But particularly as your children move up through the grades, having access to Aspen becomes a more important thing. And so the usership has been going up, but there's still a long, long way to go. So if you want to know what assignments your kids have or what's due and what not, then you go on Aspen and the information is there. And so I think it's a wonderful tool. I think a lot more could be done with it. It is true that if you look at the teachers in the district and schools in the district, some schools and some individual classes and some individual teachers make much greater use. And this is not about Aspen now, but it is about digitization, Google Docs, and then teaching aids, and there are teachers who videotape their classes, and students can go back and watch them and re-listen to something. There are teachers who have audio-visual aids that they've put online that help students when they're studying something. But I think the piece that's most helpful is when teachers are organized through Google Calendar or Google Docs, and if they have there are other tools. I don't want to be a poster child for Google. But it's wonderful when your child goes to a teacher who's got everything online. And so, if you, at the start of the year, your kid is in the band, for instance, let's say, I know that at Central High School, the band calendar is all digitally available. You don't have to go searching around and looking for it. It's right there and you can see what's going on. I'm sure it's likewise at other schools. And without pointing to any particular people, I know of one principal who's a bit of a Google guru, and he actually sometimes other school or department heads have him help with efforts that they're involved in, and these things, I guess, are becoming more than just a nice to have. They're becoming a needed thing. And if you look at, it'll take a long time. We have teachers and people in our school district who didn't grow up with handheld devices and social media and universal access and the internet even and all that. Although those old fogies like me are becoming fewer and fewer. But it does enable the flow of information in the classroom, and the way the classroom works, to work so much better. And students are able to. I love when I see one of my kids working on something, and they can work on something. They can send a message to their teacher, and they get the answer back. It might be not in real time, but they're able to get an answer back. They submit their work that way, and so there was a time in my house where we went from having kids having binders and paperwork for lots of different subjects to a time where, yes, they were doing things using a computer, but then the thing was, did we have paper and ink for the printer so we could print paper out to bring it to a teacher? Now, by the way, there's still a lot of printing goes on, but it's great that some teachers accept it electronically, and that's it. And by the way, I'm going to talk in a minute about some misconceptions about our schools, because I'm concerned about some of the things that I've seen on social media in the last week. Well, actually every week, but this week brought it to a new height about misconceptions and untruths about what our schools do and don't do and what happens in them, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things is that what the public should know is that not every kid in Manchester has access to a computer, and not every kid has access to the internet, and not every kid has access to paper to print stuff out. So that seems like a nothing to many people who have a ream of paper, and the $10 or $5 for another ream of blank paper is an afterthought. For some families, that's dinner on the table for one of the 7 nights during the week. So that's just reality. The truth of it. So, and then of course our schools do have the ability for students to go in and print out their work. Now, it's not that there is a huge number, certainly not the majority, but you will see, if you go to the library, you will see people at the library at night time or in the evening working on things. And the nice thing about it, of course, is that they're able to go into school and they can print it out on the printer. So kudos to our school system for that. I want to also talk about just the coffee and conversations with the superintendent. I keep on ringing this bell, so to speak, because I hear it just... the lack of the amount of misinformation out in the world about our schools and what happens in them and what doesn't happen in them is just I think it's appalling. It bothers me no end to listen to people. I'm fine perhaps with people not knowing. It's the problem is that they think they know things that aren't true at all. And these are not, policy issues or interpretation issues, or, we differ in opinions or something. I'm talking about, facts about things like the number of students we have in the city, the amount of money we spend per student, the number of teachers in the city, the number of schools in the city, when the schools are open, whether we have a homework policy or not, what the discipline policy is. I mean, all of this is in the public domain. It doesn't need to be debated. Well, it can be debated. I'm not trying to stifle debate, but, there are resources there to just go look for it. It's not like there's 20 copies issued by 20 different fake news outlets. You can go on the Manchester School District website and you can find out a lot of stuff. You can go to the state the website to find out stuff there. You can ask a teacher, you can ask the superintendent, you can ask an administrator, a principal, whatever, your school board member. The level of number of people who, especially on social media, who I see it happen all the time, where somebody says something that's entirely incorrect. And then it's like piranhas around a piece of meat. There are people jumping in from all sides. When I was at that school, it used to do this, but now it's all gone to hell in a handbasket. And like, what are you talking about, man? It's like none of what you said is true. But anyway, let's not, don't get me started, as they say. So, coffee and conversation with the superintendent is this wonderful thing that Dr. Vargas has been doing since he came to the district, where he goes out into the schools early in the morning and late in the afternoon to meet with anybody who wants to meet with him. And there, it's a very open format. There's never a big crowd there, and you can go and you can listen to the few words he has to say. It's usually 1 hour or less. You don't have to stay for the whole hour. And there's nobody controlling the questions, so you're sitting in a group of maybe 8 or 9 people, and you can ask any question you want. And in fairness to Dr. Vargas, he's been a breath of fresh air in this district, and he's not afraid to take the questions, and he's not afraid to answer them. And he'll tell you the good news when it's good and the bad news when it's bad. So the next 2 are actually tomorrow and the following day. So tomorrow, Wednesday. Let me see if I brought them up here. So tomorrow, I'm looking at my computer off to the side. So tomorrow we have, where is it? December, yeah. So December 5th at 7:30 a.m. is at Highland Goffs Falls. So that'll be 7:30 to about 8:30 in the morning. And then the following day on Thursday the 6th at Parkside, the middle school, at 4:30 p.m. So 7:30 on tomorrow morning, December 5th at Highland Goffs Falls, and Thursday evening at 4:30 at Parkside. So if you have issues or questions or things you're concerned about with anything, that's the right place to go and ask him. And I think as a methodology, as a way of dealing with things and handling issues in your child's school life, or in issues that you may have as a parent. I think the first port of call, so to speak, is the school itself, and to talk to the principal or assistant principal, talk to the teacher, I guess, first before escalating it to the principal. And it's at that point, if the answer is not satisfactory at that point, and just to insert into this here, it is always, almost always, in the many years that I've had kids in the Manchester School District, it's always been the case that any issues that I have had have not needed to be escalated above the level of assistant principal or principal. But if in the few occasions that is required, then the place to go is to the administration and talk to Miss Gillis or Miss Allen, one of the assistant superintendents, or talk to the superintendent himself. Send them an email, drop them a phone call. I know of no circumstance when calls or emails are not responded to by those individuals, and likewise by principals, etc., in the city. And it's important that people understand that, because if there is a principal in the city of Manchester who gets an email from parents, and she or he is in the habit of not responding to parents who contact them, that principal or assistant principal wouldn't be around too long. So at the end of all of that, when you get up through that sort of logic tree of the teacher, the assistant principal or principal, take it out of the building after that to go to the district, assistant superintendent, superintendent, and by the way, there are other administrators. I saw some conversations on Facebook about buses and bus routes, etc., and people are talking again, a cross-talk about who's responsible for it, who manages it, who does the scheduling, how the scheduling are done. And I'm like, maybe just people like typing on the internet. I don't know. It's not that complicated. But ultimately, what I would like to see happen is that a lot of the garbage, a lot of the non-core stuff that ends up on the table in front of school board members at board meetings, when we decide to start dealing with these policies and things. Not policies, I guess that's the right venue for policies, but other things. I am always annoyed, whether I'm there in person or watching from home, when it gets late into the night and we have a discussion going on at the school board about something that clearly should have been managed long before the meeting, or should have been handled at a different forum, that the school board meeting is not the place for it. And I would hope that not that this is just a Mayor Craig problem, but that Mayor Craig would take cognizance of that and say, why don't we take this subject offline, see if we can get answers. Seek your answers at the school district offices, and if that's not satisfactory, then bring it back to the board. A couple of things also. So Christmas is upon us, and I was reminded of that because of the parade, or almost upon us, and because of the Christmas parade that was held on Saturday last in Manchester, and it was wonderful to see such a big crowd out. I think the weather being mild helped that. But there was a good crowd of people out there, and it was a fun parade. It seems to get better every year. If you have kids, or if you don't have kids, the Manchester Christmas Parade is a fun thing to do. It's a couple of hours, perhaps, if you stay for the whole thing. Of course, those of us who are if you're how to say. So if you look at it from a religious point of view, of course, the whole season is the season of Advent, and the season of Advent just began this past week. Was the first Sunday of Advent, and Advent is the period in the church where people prepare for Christmas, and Christmas doesn't actually start until the 25th with the Feast of the Nativity, the birth of Jesus. So it always seems a little strange to me. I really find it odd when people are the sort of Christmas shopping in late October, but even still, to have a Christmas parade on the 2nd or whatever, 1st or whatever it was of December seems a little incongruous to me. But I'm not second guessing it and saying it shouldn't happen or anything. I was like, wow, it's a Christmas parade. Santa Claus is here and he's a month early. But it was nice to see. It was nice to see a lot of people there. It was nice to see a good number of public representatives marching in that parade. I was disappointed this year when I was a few weeks back at the Veterans Day parade that so few of our public representatives had the either thought of it or were able to to march in the Veterans Day parade. I thought it was a poor showing, but it was great to see so many public representatives there for the Christmas parade. I'm sure as we get into next year, and this is the off year for local elections, we'll be having elections. Once we get into January and February, the conversations about who's running for boards and all that will start again already on this 2-year cycle that we're on. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people attending parades, next year. A few things in the news. I hate to be central specific here, but there were a couple of things. There was one ex-student from Manchester Central was in the news today. Ryan Day, who's been appointed or hired as the head coach at Ohio State, which is it's wonderful to have a Manchester alum out there in the world flying the flag high on behalf of our state and on behalf of our schools and Central High School. Also in the news this week was Julia Chappelle, who graduated last year from Central High School, and she was named the #1 tennis player in the NCAA or NCAA, in the Northeast region. So good for her. Another ex-soccer player from the Central High School girls soccer team, and of course Paige LeBerge, the daughter of the boys soccer team at Central. Paige LeBerge, last week or the week before, signed her letter of intent with Florida State, or the University of Central Florida, I think, was it? Let me just see. Florida State University, and she's got a full boat scholarship. She's still she's graduating early, as I understand it, from Central at the end of the semester, and I'd like to wish her every good fortune. An amazing young lady, a great soccer player, and to get a full boat scholarship, is a good thing. But to get one into a Division I school, that's as good as it gets. So she's going to be playing the top soccer at the highest level available to a young lady in the United States. So I wish her every success, and frankly, I expect to hear more of her as time goes on. And Coach Lally has been very fortunate at Central over the last. Well, he's been there many years now, but the team has won the state championship twice in the last 2 years. Each of the last 2 years, but there has been an amazing group of girls going through there, and they continue to come. And just the all-state girls soccer team, 2 of the Central team were named. Erin Fleury, who's only a sophomore, who's an extraordinary talent, talented in multiple sports, but a very good soccer player. And then, of course, Paige LeBerge was also named to that team. So, congratulations to that's a lot of people who made the press this week. Speaking about people who made the press, I think that it's important to acknowledge the passing of President Herbert Walker Bush over the last few days, and it's been edifying and heartening to see the response to the passing of the 41st president. I think the response of people, of politicians and our public representatives in Washington, D.C. Has been commendable, given the sort of divisiveness and anger and ire and lack of seeing eye to eye that is so apparent in Congress today. It was heartening to sit and watch such a dignified and civil acceptance. The body of the coffin of the president was accepted onto the Capitol and is currently, as I speak, laid there, and as people come by to observe, etc. And even President Donald Trump, who I have to say I don't give a lot of credit to for behaving well in these kinds of circumstances. I would have to commend the fact that he, thus far at least, has treated this with the dignity that it deserves, and so his propensity to hit the tweet button we'll see if that will last. I hope it does, because it's a breath of fresh air that we don't feel like a bunch of kids in the playground, but rather our country has the ability to still treat with respect those deserving of it. There's a lot there's nothing I can that will be added by me to the remembrance of President Bush. I think we're often inclined to put on rose-tinted glasses and be quite benevolent about people when they pass, and this also is true of the first President Bush. But even though not everything that he ever stood for or did, it's not as though he was without an error here or an error there. There was a dignity about the man and a gentility about him that was very attractive and commendable. And I don't want to make cheap points about today, but I think that young people, when they look at leaders and have people to look up to, then someone like George Bush, our 41st president, certainly had a way about him and a way of being that was dignified. And so I think we all mourn his passing. I think that in the midst there are negative things that we won't dwell on. I do think that his lowest moment was probably being associated with the Willie Horton ad against Michael Dukakis, and the behaviour of Lee Atwater, his campaign manager at that time. But we can that was something that took me a long time to get over, because as candidate he was still responsible for, this was the first case of sort of racial dog whistling that we had in the United States. But on the day that's in this, I think what I'd like to remember about President Bush is his contribution to the American with Disabilities Act. It was under his leadership that the ADA was passed in 1990, and then further, if I could, and then also the followed by the it would be it's now the IDIA, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, but so ADA compliance, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act. Lots of things have changed in the United States. There are some seminal pieces of legislation in the United States that have had a huge effect, not just here in the United States, but actually across the world. And Title IX of the Education Act had a huge impact on the availability of sports to on an equal basis to both men and women in the United States, and then that was copied by other countries around the world and in other societies. You can draw a straight line between. I'm sorry to be soccer centric. I know people are of other sports, and I can't talk sensibly about some sports that I'm not directly involved in, but you can draw a straight line between the success, even the existence of the WNBA in basketball, or of the women's national soccer team in the United States and its success. You can draw a straight line back to Title IX. It was that piece of legislation mandating, directing that federal funds or federally funded schools could not discriminate in terms of funding between male and female athletes and students, and so it was no longer acceptable for a college to spend $99 million on their football program and then $1 million on the girls' sports. So that was a very important piece of legislation. There are others. The Voters' Right Act, of course, is huge, and the Civil Rights Act. Those are bigger than these ones I'm talking about. But the Title IX, that chapter or paragraph of the Education Act, and then the ADA, the American with Disabilities Act, was huge. The reason why, when you walk on the streets of Manchester today and you get to a street corner and the curb is lowered to pavement height to allow wheelchair access from one to the other, that is because of ADA. It's both because of ADA requirements and then ADA funding for those requirements. When you see it everywhere. When you look at an elevator, you get on an elevator, and the telephone in the elevator is a push button, hands-free telephone for emergencies, and it's at waist height, so that somebody in a wheelchair can access it. It also has braille, so that one can feel which button is which. All of those things largely did not exist prior to ADA compliance issues. I remember on numerous occasions in the 1990s being involved in with architectural firms, very large architectural firms, designing significant national and national headquarters and national buildings, where even then people had to be forced to, one would often find oneself saying that this configuration is not ADA compliant, and then a change which was being resisted would be made, but it allowed access for people, access whether people were blind or were not ambulatory or were in wheelchairs, etc. And that has made a huge difference to people with disabilities in the United States, and that legislation has also become a guidepost and something that is looked to by other countries when they look at how to proceed and how to do this, and so that's one of the many legacies. Besides the fact that President Bush was a pilot. He's the last president of the United States who actually fought an active combat. He was. I don't need to tell you all. Those of you who are interested know already. But just to the head of the CIA, vice president of the United States, president of the United States, father of a president of the United States. Just an amazing a lifetime. We've seen two larger-than-life individuals pass from our national body politic in the last half of this year. John McCain, a very different but similar individual who dedicated his life to the country that he loved. And then followed by George W. Bush Sr., who also came through the same sort of path and served his country for many years. So we owe a debt of gratitude to these people, and I would like to think that our education system here in Manchester and the education system which we call our homes, when we're talking to our kids on these matters, that they would, with all the other examples, some of which are pretty negative, that they could see through that smoke and smog, and see through to the bright, hopeful, dignified, brave, men and women, in this case men, who have laid out a path for them to follow. And I'd like to think that today there are people in our midst here in Manchester who will go on to follow these examples, and not the lesser examples. There's a family here in Manchester right now who've got 3 kids out of school who are serving the U.S. military, and one of them's at West Point and the other's at the Naval Academy, and they just happen to be friends of my kids, and the parents are friends of ours, and even quite distant, with no claim to fame from them at all, other than having the privilege of knowing them. I feel very proud of the fact that of what they have done, and what those parents have done, and what their kids are doing, and it does fill me with a sense of pride. And I would call them by name, other than I don't want to get into I don't want to embarrass anybody, but I think we all should be proud of these people. And when we see people talking about young people of today and who they are and what they are, and how terrible they are, and something needs to be done, I think they should know that there are great young people coming out of Manchester every year, the products of our homes, yes, but also of our city and of our schools, who've been taught and have learned to be great human beings by our school system. And there's no question in my mind that our schools do an amazing job of turning out great citizens every day. And with that, I'd like to turn to this issue that has been that was in the news, so to speak, in Manchester in the last week or so, a week and a half. And it has to do with an incident at Central High School where a young lady was attacked or assaulted by another girl, and it was videotaped, and so because it was videotaped, it was spread far and wide. Let me say that I know nothing about the incident, and I do not know the people involved or the names of the people involved, so I have nothing to add to that, because I simply do not know. So I don't know who it was, I don't know why it happened, and I know nothing about it. But I do want to say this: the people who were jumping on this on social media and mouthing off about what should be done with these young girls, and et cetera, was just appalling to me. First of all, if you look at the video, and the video was available, still is in some places, it's this young lady has her hair pulled, and that's not an insignificant thing. I've seen, and I don't know if it happened in this case, but I've seen, hair being pulled out of people's heads, removing skin with it. This is not like, oh, she had her hair pulled, boo-hoo, it's a little thing. No, that could be a very big thing. This young lady did go to the hospital and then was released afterwards. And as one of her relatives pointed out, she was worried not just about the physical side of this young girl's welfare, but also her psychological well-being afterwards. And I don't want to lessen that in any way. Like I said, I don't know the specifics, but I have to tell you something. Fights and physical violence. First of all, I shouldn't have to say it. There's no place for physical violence and fights. But when I was in high school, there were fights. I'm sure there have been fights in high schools since time immemorial. I think what's important about the episode at Central is that if you look at the video, despite the fact that people want to describe it as something much larger than it is unfortunate, but we know from the video, all that we know is the video, and from the video we see one thing, for instance, that there was a teacher there. The whole video is perhaps 15 seconds, maybe 20 seconds. There's a teacher right there within 5 seconds. So as it is happening on this stairwell, there's a teacher there who immediately steps in. Now, unfortunately, the young girl yanking on the other girl's hair doesn't leave go at that stage, but there's a teacher jumps in right at that stage. So for all of you who might have been on social networks talking about kids running wild in corridors and nobody there to protect them, and it's all bunkum, garbage, and untrue. I have spent time, not an awful lot in some of these schools' cases, but I have been in West High School, MST, Memorial and Central High School during the day when students are there. Those schools are quiet, orderly, well organised, disciplined and controlled. I have never seen evidence of kids running wild, of bad behaviours happening when the kids are transitioning from one class to another. Now, if you've never been in a room or in a corridor with 120 kids going in one direction and 120 kids going the other direction, well, you've led a very sheltered life. And if you think that everybody whispers as they walk down the corridor, then you're just living in cloud cuckoo land. But the truth of the matter is that if you have a young man or woman in Manchester's public schools, especially in the high schools, you can and should expect that they go to school every day, into a school that is well organised and where discipline issues are taken seriously, and where they can go and be safe, and that they can come back home in the evening without having been attacked, etc. Now, so I just want to put the lie to the idea that there's some sort of that our schools are sort of some kind of no-go area or something. They're actually the opposite. But many people, maybe some of you watching this, don't actually know that. So what you know is what you read in the papers and what people say at supermarkets. I was standing in a line, I think I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. I happened to be standing in a line a few weeks back, and there were 5 or 6 people, and a discussion ensued about our schools. And I don't even want to reiterate it all, but it was a joke. Everything, I don't usually think I'm the smartest guy in the room. Actually, usually I know for a fact that I'm not. And I don't normally think I know more than everybody else. So I know it wasn't that. It's just simply that these people were talking nonsense. And the conversation went on, and they were escalating it and repeating things one to the other. And it was all hearsay and half-baked thoughts and what they thought they knew. And I felt like I stood there just... It's not my mode to generally sit back and say nothing, but there was no point. We were beyond the point of reason. And so when I looked at the discussions about the assault, if you want to, whatever you want to call it, at Central High School of this girl, you must lead a pretty sheltered life if you think that's a deed that should be escalated to the point of I've got to pull my kids out of school and I got to move someplace else. Because if you can find a school where that doesn't happen, well, God bless you and good luck, because that's not a realistic view. I in no way endorse or agree with or lessen the fact that violence shouldn't happen, but you can't put 1,800 teenagers. You can't put 1,800 adults. Actually, sometimes you can't put 18 adults in a room together without having... I mean, have you looked around? Next time you go to the supermarket, just, wonder if you were locked in a room with any random 100 of these people in the parking lot. Do you think some of them are lovely? I like people. I'm a people person. Lots of people are nice. Is everybody perfect? No. Schools are exactly the same. So it's about how we deal with these things. Now, it is true, in this example at Central High School, there was a teacher there immediately, literally, as it was happening, there was a teacher standing there, and he was involved and hands-on within 5 seconds, and it's seen on the video there. But it is also true that, Central High School has one less vice principal than it lost 3 years ago. And so there are 4 buildings at Central High School with 3 assistant principals. And those assistant principals have got lots of work to do. there are lots of things that happen every day in a high school, with kids graduating and kids coming in and kids transferring and kids having all kinds of difficulties and needing advice and support and love and attention and reprimanding and all the other things that assistant principals have to do, and organizing. And so to have this this school with one less assistant principal was never a good idea, and still isn't a good idea. And not just because of disciplinary issues, but just organizational issues and workload issues. The principals and assistant principals are maxed out, doing more work than they are able to do, and so. They haven't told me this directly, at the ones at Centra at least, but I know that generally speaking, it's the case that they're constantly in reactive mode or dealing with what is urgent and necessary, and there's little time for reflection, forward planning, strategizing, or doing the things that on the wish list of what might be nice to do. So there is a consequence to under-resourcing our schools, and when you pull an assistant principal out, well, there's one less person there to do it. So another thought for those people who are out there, throwing bricks, metaphorically, at our school system, you're the voters who voted the people in who pulled that assistant principal out of Central. There's a piece on the internet right now regarding at a recent meeting. If I can find it here, I brought it up, I think. At a recent meeting, there was a discussion about. I think I might have lost it. Right. Oh yeah. So a discussion about truancy, and it says that the sort of board of school committee discussed the topic about their truancy policy and what to do about truancy. Now, the first point to be made about truancy is the Manchester School District has 13,500 students, and guess how many truancy officers we have? So let's take a moment to do that. Okay, so the answer, believe it or not, is 1. Now, I know some of you were saying they probably have 5, 10, 1 for each quadrant of the city. They've probably got 2 for the high schools, 2 for the middle schools, and 4 for the elementary schools. No. 22 schools, 13,500 students, 1 truancy officer. How'd you like that? Now, who in the planning sat down and said, what do we need? Well, we need to heat the buildings, we need to pave the parking lots, we need to do snow removal, we should probably put salt down so people can actually walk into the schools in the winter time, we need some teachers and books, we need some special ed teachers and physiotherapists. What else do we need? Oh yeah, truancy. We need truancy, and we're planning for, how big is our school district? Okay, I got it. 13,500 students, and the right number, ladies and gentlemen, for the number of truancy officer is 1, you say? Can you get that idiot out of here, the guy who said 1, because obviously he has no idea what a school district looks like. So sorry for the little dramatics, but I got to tell you, anybody on this school board, or the school board before it, or the school board before that, and some of you, or some of them, have served on all of them. And we'll go back into the next meeting and discuss cupcake policy and whatever other nonsense of the day. Find some program for some person that they want to give money to, whatever it happens to be. But they sit there, month in, month out, meeting in, meeting out. There's 1 truancy officer for the city. So basically, we don't really have a truancy officer, because having 1 is as good as having none. Because if somebody gave you that job tomorrow morning, or you're starting on Monday, so we'll give you, it is Tuesday, we'll give you 5 days to plan out on a sheet of paper somewhere, get out your pen and sheet of paper, and plan your first day's activities. Where do you start? So, here you go, here's 13,500 students, and go solve this truancy problem and see who you can chase down. So, It's just ridiculous. Just think about it, ladies and gentlemen. Any one school, you could put a truancy officer in there, and the truancy officer could be a full-time employee working in that one school, finding out why kids are not in school today, why they're not coming to school regularly, why they're coming to school late, why they've dropped out, why their sister's not here, there's plenty of work. But in the city of Manchester, because we don't want to tell the state and the citizens that we have 0 truancy officers, we take a ridiculous number and we take one and we say, there you go. But of course, the people who did this are the same people who thought that 42 kids in a middle school 8th grade math class was a good thing. So they had no problem with taking 2 classes and giving them 1 teacher, and that would be fine. And we could get to the point, in the future where some genius might decide that 60 kids for 1 teacher is enough. It'll depend on what the tax cap comes in at. Whatever the tax cap says, that's what we'll do. So having 1 truancy officer is a joke, and those people responsible for it, well, shame on you. And I'm sorry, I'm tired, you're tired of listening to me, and, no one wants to hear it because, let's all pretend. Aren't there great things happening in our district? Yeah, there's great things happening in our district. We mentioned them tonight. Paige LaBerge, Julia Chappelle, lots of wonderful young people. And I know the same thing is repeated at West High School and MST and at Memorial, and it's repeated at our middle schools and all across our grade schools. I see kids out collecting stuff for the Santa Fund, gathering coats and hats and jackets for the homeless. There's people doing wonderful stuff. But the school board and the taxpayers who vote them in, yeah, here's your 1 truancy officer. And that's repeated right down through the system. We have sucked this puppy dry. As I've said many times, we've had people come and go who've come riding in like the knight on the white horse, who are going to sort out the problems in the district. There are still people on the board, mayor and aldermen in Manchester who are convinced that the problem with the school district is a waste of money and money being spent in ways that shouldn't be spent. Now, they can never find you, they'll never identify you where that money is. But that's their view, and it makes me want to tear my hair out that it's impossible to talk to them. I mentioned last week, and I mentioned about the fire department or the police department, and I'm a big fan of the fire. I've got lots of good friends who are firefighters in Manchester and police officers. But the contrast is amazing. If there was a ladder truck driving down Elm Street that was rusted out and the tires were flat on it, and there was a driver sitting up the front and nobody on the back, the people of Manchester would say, what the heck is going on with our fire department? If the police cars were driving around the city and they were old-fashioned and shabby-looking, the people of Manchester would say, we need to do something about it. When there were potholes all over the city last year and it was dug up everywhere, the city actually bonded money, which I thought was a joke. It actually bonded money, in other words, borrowed money from the future to pay for paving roads. That was under the previous mayor. And with all his helpers, before anybody says anything, he didn't do it on his own. And I agree it needed to be done, but it should have been done as part of a program all along. But the point is, once people saw the potholes there and they couldn't drive over them every day, and the aldermen were fine with, we just need to solve this, let's get it done. It's the same attitude that had aldermen turn around and want to fund this so-called program at West High School because there's a real need there, and they saw it and they're like, we need to do something. Let's get $30,000 and give it to this person to go and do something about it at West High School. Ignoring the fact that there are kids all over the district without the resources that they need, that if what it actually takes is to go into City Hall and bring 5 or 6 people in to talk and say, you know what my daughter has and what my daughter doesn't have, if that's what it takes to get the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to react, I don't understand the disconnect between the the Mayor and the Board of Aldermen. The disconnect between them and what's going on in our schools. why they can't see. You don't have to know anything about education. You don't even have to know where our schools are. And I can tell you some of our aldermen don't. You don't even have to know where all our schools are, and you don't have to know details about what's going on in our schools to know that one truancy officer in a city the size of Manchester, the largest city in the state of New Hampshire, is a joke. And so the fact that the Board of School Committee is now referring to committee this issue of what to do about truancy, etc., I'm sure there are lots of things need to be changed about the truancy policy. There is a disconnect between the current policy and what's realistic. And so I think it's right to visit policy, and that's the rightful role of the school board. But as part of this review of policy, then the review of practice should go along with it, because we do a wonderful job of looking at paperwork and examining policies and bringing in an attorney and spending money on an attorney to help us to look at how to change the policy and how it might impact things and what's allowable and what's not. But when it comes to actually putting bums in seats or paying somebody to do some work or to actually change the program so it has the resources it needs, not so much. The other thing, ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind people of as we come to the end of the hour is that today is the 4th of December. And it is very important that people be aware that the sign-up time for health care under the Affordable Health Care Act finishes on December the 15th. Please, if you need health care, please go to healthcare.gov and see what health care is available to you. The Trump administration has removed funding for for publicizing the Health Care Act. It is hugely successful, contrary to what some extremist commentators will have to say. Those who actually are using it and rely upon it and can now be covered with pre-existing conditions, etc., find it hugely beneficial. There are solutions there that are very affordable, down to very small amounts, tens of dollars per month. That are available to people, but for next year you have to apply before December 15th. The website is healthcare.gov. If you do not have employer supplied healthcare coverage right now, or if you're not on Medicaid or Medicare, and even if you are perhaps, go to healthcare.gov, put in your details. It's a painless exercise. It takes 10 or 15 minutes, and you might be amazed at what is available to you. But you have 11 days from today in which to do it. A couple of things I didn't get to tonight, but I wanted to get to. But at the last minute, I just wanted to touch off the fact that there's a huge problem with vaping amongst our young people, and something as small as half the size of a cigarette lighter that can be held in the palm of a hand that looks like nothing and is smokeless. There's an epidemic, I'm told, across the area, across the country even, with people vaping, and in something this size, they can be doing the equivalent of 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And because it's odorless, there are kids doing it in front of parents, sitting with you while you're there. It's just, and it's, nicotine is as addictive as it ever was. So please, parents, be keeping an eye out for that. I'll leave you with that thought for the week. I hope you have a wonderful week in your preparations for Christmas. Please be safe out there. Stay warm. The cold weather's coming in, and I'll be here, God willing, next week, and we'll talk again. Good night now from Jim O'Connell. Bye bye.